When the Walt Disney Company revealed Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs to the world, it set this new precedent that full-length feature films were here and that they could make a big profit, that the world was ready for them, to accept them as art, that you could even make quite a bit of money off of the soundtrack. But, as historians and lovers of cartoons are aware, it wasn't exactly as cut and dry for that second film onward. Pinocchio may have gotten even better critical reviews than Snow White. It's one of the few films that, at least for quite a while, I haven't checked recently, has a 100% rating from the critics for Rotten Tomatoes. But it lost money. Then there was Fantasia, which reviews were fine, not as good as Pinocchio, and the ratings, well, I guess we can call it ratings, the revenue was worse. Big budget, high art, and it really put a dent in the company. Dumbo had a much more muted budget, so that made its money back just fine, and I believe also helped fill the hole from Fantasia. And as for Bambi, I'm honestly not really sure, but I don't think it was a huge flop. So sounds cut and dry after that, because after all, didn't the company move to Cinderella after that and start the Silver Era, where not every film was a financial hit, but all those movies are still beloved to this day, plenty of them having a huge relevance in the parks. I mean, come on, the Teacup Ride? That's from Alice in Wonderland. Couldn't have been that big of a flop. But there is a whole era of films between the golden and the silver. And that's the package film era. Or as many other people call it, the wartime era. Because the films were affected by America entering World War II. If you are an American, you've probably heard in your history classes about how, World War II, its recruitment was through the roof. All Americans were gung-ho to get ready. That doesn't mean that there wasn't a draft, and there weren't still people who had pretty stable jobs and families they didn't really want to leave to go join the war. And then it happened anyway. Such was the fate for quite a few animators at the Walt Disney Company, as a lot of Walt's plans suddenly fell through because animators had to join the war efforts against their will. That's the thing about war. Even ones like World War II, war is still just world leaders deciding what cause can we use to send the peasants out to die so we can pin medals on our chest. And that really messes with the infrastructure and the economy. And here's the weird thing, too, for animation. You'd think that was all that happened to the animation industry, promising young animators had to leave their wife and kids, or if they're by themselves by that point, just leave their careers to go join the war efforts. But that's not all that happened. For some reason, the American government was convinced that the animation industry was exactly the place to really pump out pro-war messaging. This is a slightly infamous thing that I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of, banned Bugs Bunny cartoons, banned Mickey Mouse cartoons, or the most famous one, that one where Donald Duck Sieg Heils to Hitler. That one's real. That's a real short. But why do those exist? It's like I was hinting at. The American government commissioned them. That's not a joke. And Disney got one of the weirdest cases of this.
Saludos Amigos.
When you go on vacation and you get you take your cameras, your phones, and you take all your footage. I do it. I went to Disneyland twice now, and I actually have full-length videos of my trip there, just some quick snippets. Can I convince you to watch it? Maybe not. It's a travel vlog thing that is just vacation footage. But I don't put slides in there. I don't just put still photos. That's boring. Speaking of boring, Saludos Amigos. Because it is just travel vlog footage. with some cartoons and some educational value. Why? Because the American government was worried that South America might end up joining the Axis powers, so they asked the Walt Disney Company to make a film that was how great South America is. How insane does this sound? Because as someone who is a history buff and a big animation fan, this still sounds insane to me. And I've seen the film twice now, and both times I was bored out of my skull. It does just feel like I'm at school again, but also watching someone's travel vlog, and to give myself some credit, it's not as interesting as the way I do my kind of travel vlogs. It's people talking over all the footage. It's, a wide-angle shot of some people walking off of the plane. You don't know what the airport looks like. They're just walking off of the plane. And it's just how great all this is. I'm like, oh, and here's Goofy telling you what all these cowboy words are.
Whack-a-noodle. The gaucho's method of eating looks quite simple. Bread and meat are held in one hand, the knife in the other.
Because as you know, South America basically has their own cowboys. Some of the cartoons aren't half bad, but most of them are just really boring. And I don't know what Disney was hoping to get out of this. Because when you watch it, it is kind of so clear that they are kind of forced to do this, that they really have no idea what to do with this, really. And then also, they introduce this green parrot, Jose Carioca, or Joe Carioca. For some reason, he's also called Joe a couple times. And you might know Jose Carioca if you're a big fan of the Disney parks, or if you grew up on the House of Mouse TV show, like I did, because he was a regular there. And this is where he's from. This very, very short film about how great South America is. He just shows up and instantly becomes friends with Donald Duck and teaches him a lot of South American words, a lot about their culture. Again, this feels a lot like school. He's not much of a character. He is just there to kind of teach us what South America's like. Which inherently is not bad. You just kind of feel this kind of lack of interest from the filmmakers. And why would they have been interested? They were told to make this. And it feels like it. All of Saludos Amigos feels like an obligation. Especially for the fact it isn't even 45 minutes long. It is crazy how there's always so much argument in what constitutes as a feature film. Like most people, if it's less than 30 minutes, it's a short film or an episode of TV. But, at one point, does it become a feature-length film, Is less than an hour still a feature film? I hear most people argue it's a short film, which is technically its own category. But Saludos Amigos is in the Disney animated canon. So it's a feature film. It was in theaters and everything. And it's about 43 minutes long. If you're wondering why I have not much to talk about it other than it's boring, I would have to go through and tell you about every single short. And if you didn't watch my quick channel update video, as I said there, I can't be bothered to do that. If I still had a good microphone, a good working microphone, maybe I could pull up a list of all of them and go through why they mostly didn't work. But isn't it more important to just say that? This mostly doesn't work. Because it's barely a film. It's not horrible, I guess, but it's one of the least interesting films of the Disney animated canon. Mostly because it feels like it is an obligation. Because it was. It's cool to see the roots of Jose Carioca if you're a huge fan of the Disney parks, because he's still a regular there. I was there for Christmas time last year, and he was still palling around with Donald and another character we'll get to in a little bit. And it's kind of cool to see Goofy as a South American cowboy, but even that skit kind of runs the course so long, you're just kind of like, we're still doing this? You're still telling me the definitions of these, 5 words? Was this all you felt like talking about? And again, just the vacation footage aspect of it is like, we didn't have enough money to animate this? Is that what's going on here? Did the U.S. government not give you enough? It is not a good film. I was going to be nice and say not a great film, but no, I believe I gave it 1 star. This is a pretty bad movie. It is utterly boring, to the point where there's not much you could do to fix it. Because they would have had to care, and it really feels like they didn't. And that's not a knock. You know, when you're told to do something because you have to for some weird obligation that probably didn't even make that much sense to you, what are you gonna do? Because I'll say it, it's always great when a country, or in this case a whole continent, does not fall to an army of evil, willingly join an army of evil. I don't know if making them a 43-minute movie is the way to convince them not to join evil. Of all the Disney movies in the animated canon you can skip, this is absolutely one of them. Which is so weird because there's a sequel.
Walt Disney does it again.
So this might be the one you've already heard of. This is the Three Caballeros, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not even sure if the film pronounces it correctly all the time. But did you like the South American shorts? Wow, that's great. And this movie starts out a bit more promising. In fact, I remember when I first saw this movie in college, because I actually did see both these movies many years ago for the first time. I was just out of college or near the tail end of college. And even then, I didn't enjoy Saludos Amigos, but I actually did kind of enjoy Three Caballeros. And watching it again, you know, I had that hope up, especially because the first few shorts, vast improvement. They're actually fun shorts, you know, little cartoons, and they're pretty good. They're funny. They're a little educational. And then Jose Carioca comes back, you know, meeting Donald and all that, and, you know, they have some nice funny banter, and then it starts feeling like a tourism ad. Like, even more than the first one did. The first one really felt like a school lesson. This film started feeling like an ad. Like you'd be sitting down in the bus depot wondering where to go, and then you see Jose Carioca tell Donald, "Have you been to Bahia?"
But have you been to Bahia, Donald? No? Well, let's go. If you go to Bahia, my friend, you'll never return.
And the movie starts falling apart after that. I can't say all the segments after are bad. I'm pretty sure I still liked one of them. It was either this film or the other film, and I believe it was this one, that had the one about the plane. And I think that one was pretty alright. That's the problem. I can't even entirely remember that well. It's not because it's been about a year since I've seen them. You start struggling to forget which film had which after a while, because that's just how these films go in this packaged film era. The last two are the only ones you will remember which shorts were which, because they had 2 each. These ones, they have about 10 or so. And they kind of all bleed together. But as for the Three Caballeros, why you'd remember it is because, hey, Panchito shows up. Isn't that great? Panchito, the third Caballero. The other guy who pals around with Jose and Donald at the parks. Which, again, got no problem with. Like, I can knock these films all I want for feeling empty and forced. And the reason that is sad is because I wouldn't mind interesting, entertaining films that tell me more about South American culture. It is a gap in my knowledge. I don't know the culture of South America that well. It'd be nice to have some more knowledge. But I can't retain it that much with how boring these movies are. But I should keep talking about Caballeros itself. That way it doesn't feel like I'm just trying to combine the movies into one. In a way, it's inevitable because, you know, Saludos Amigos is the one that just introduces Jose, has, like, what feels like stock footage, even though it's actual vacation footage, and is only 43 minutes long. Caballeros is over an hour. It introduces Panchito, and there's an actual emphasis on trying to make, like, a short cartoon anthology thing going on here. But it's still pretty boring after a while. And what I think I liked the first time and didn't like this time was Caballeros, after a while, near the end, sort of gives up on making any sort of logical sense. It gets really zany. The color theory is wild. The shorts just kind of explode. And it's just a lot of music for the end, too. And if you're not used to that, it's great. You know, it's so fun. It's so bombastic. But if you've seen enough animated movies that do something similar, Caballeros kind of makes you go, wow, I've seen this concept done way better, including by the Walt Disney Company, even for the time. Like, I think the Pink Elephant segment from Dumbo. I think the Pink Elephant segment from Dumbo feels a lot stronger in what Caballeros was attempting to do. It's just not that good. It's certainly an improvement over Saludos Amigos, but it still doesn't make it a good movie. Just like Saludos Amigos, it feels like a movie that the Walt Disney Company were told to make instead of wanted to make. To be fair to it, this one feels a lot more creatively interesting. It feels a lot more, I feel a lot more the drive in this one than I did Saludos Amigos. I mean, again, they're out of vacation footage, and yet this one is notably longer. This might have been their attempt at actually salvaging this idea to turn into something good. It's such a weird way to kick off this era of animation, and yet it is exactly what everything else was. I'm not saying every other animation studio relied on anthology films, but this was sort of a trend that started here, and we would see again later, you know? I mean, most Looney Tunes movies are just compilations of old shorts put together with a new, you know, I don't know if Saludos Amigos set the precedent for, hey, if you need to make a feature film and you don't have the money, just string a bunch of cartoon shorts together and call it good. I don't know if it set the precedent for that, but it sort of feels like it. Such a strange era of animation. Something I keep trying to bring up here is that while I think most of the era titles that we get for Disney, as in Golden, Silver, Renaissance, Dark, all of those really fit those Disney era specifically, but Disney was never the only animation studio. And typically, when Disney was going through something very specific, most of the other ones were too. Like, Disney's dark era wasn't the dark era for Disney. That was the dark era for animation in general, you know? Most films of that time for animation were lower budget, lower audience, kind of doing what they want. And some companies were experimenting with it by being dark fantasies, which Disney would eventually do with Black Cauldron in that same era. But there's also a lot more stuff made just for children. It's when TV animation started popping off too. And then the Renaissance in the 90s was, whoa, animation is for everybody, and it really can break new ground, bash through the ceiling. Disney's doing it, why can't we? And we did. Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon. And so the package film era, there's not a place to talk about this in the end like usual. It needs to be talked about now. The package film era is just that weird time where World War II specifically screwed over a lot of animation. And it's so weird to look back on because there's just so much propaganda shorts because they were government mandated. Just a lot less interesting stuff because animators were overseas. And it is strange that it was only World War II that did that, because that was not the last war in America that used the draft. So they're all just this weird time capsule that, even if you are a big fan of animation, and even if you are a huge history buff, they're kind of really hard to sit through because they're either offensive by today's standards, or what happens kind of more frequently, if not as frequently, they're very boring. So, with the government obligations out of the way, the Disney company then had to move on to, oh, we're just kind of out of time and money. Let's just do compilations again. Except this time they're just completely random. Recreations of short stories, or just random ideas thought up and then animated. That's what we have for this duology of Make Mine Music and Melody Time. Now, I actually got a comment on the video where I mentioned I'd be going into the package film era, and that commenter told me, hey, Make My Music isn't on Disney Plus, but if you want to watch it, it's free on YouTube if you look for it. And I don't really want to do things that way, unfortunately, so I went out of my way. And when I received it in the mail, I got a little note from the seller. In fact, maybe it's still here. Thank you. I hope you enjoy. And you know what? For the most part, I didn't. There are a couple of good shorts in Make My Music. There really are. Casey at the Bat, that's a lot of fun.
Oh, what I like to ride up to the park and just to see Casey.
And the very end one, the famous one, The Whale Who Wanted to Sing, Willie the Whale, man, that's a real fun one. Then you've got shorts like Peter and the Wolf. In fact, if you may notice, those are the three that they put on the back to be like, wow, look at how impressive it is. These are the shorts we get. And of course the DVD also gives some extra bonus shorts. So, hey, some of these shorts aren't on Disney Plus. Disney's weird about putting the old shorts on Disney Plus. I don't know why. But, so DVD was still worth the money, even if I don't really like Make My Music all that much. Casey at the Bat is really good. Willie the Singing Whale is good. And you know what? Johnny Fedora, that short is just actually called A Love Story, but Johnny Fedora and Alice Bluebonnet, I really like that one too. But that's pretty much it. There are so many other cartoons in this collection that, well, are either pretty boring or just straight up not good. Peter and the Wolf being one of the examples of this. When Peter and the Wolf started playing, I remember going, oh, I don't like this by a lot. And it doesn't help that Tiny Toon Adventures also had their own take on Peter and the Wolf, and that's a classic episode. It's the one where there's a Wolverine who, one by one, is eating every Acme University student, while Buster eventually saves the day through music. Elmira's playing orchestra too at the same time. Classic episode. So much better than Disney's take. That is the big problem with both Make My Music and Melody Time in terms of reviewing them for accuracy. All I can tell you for the product as a whole is, do these shorts work together? Is the product thoroughly enjoyable throughout the entire runtime? Is the narrative run-through that connects all these shorts any good? That last bit I can't even do. Because to skip forward to Melody Time for a second, Melody Time doesn't even have that. It's just short after short after short after short. Make My Music kind of has some kind of a narrative, and I barely remember what it was. I think it was just like, here's us presenting this next one. Sort of like what Fantasia did, except Fantasia did it much better. I'm sorry, I've got nothing. I can tell you all I want how Casey at the Bat is very funny. It feels like a Chuck Jones or a Looney Tunes. It's so funny. There's such fun wordplay. There's such great animation. The cocky main character, who's so cocky he loses a pretty easy win. And it's really funny. It feels so Looney Tunes. It feels so Bugs Bunny. It's great. Willie the Whale also has a downer ending that is taken very seriously. And the whole thing is a fun, operatic adventure. It's so much fun. And okay, Johnny Fedora is not nearly as good as those, but the music is pretty fun. It's a nice, cute love story to the point where they just called it Love Story. That's good. And I really didn't like Peter and the Wolf, and I struggle to remember any other short in this. All the Cats Join In, Blue Bayou, Without You, Two Silhouettes. None of these are coming back to me. None of these are coming back to me. It's so bizarre how little I care about this film at the end of it, even though The three shorts in this that are good, they rival at worst and completely clear at best the shorts from the next feature, which we're going to have to talk about right now. Stay tuned.
Melody time.
For the melody time of your life, it's Walt Disney's gay, sparkling, delightful new musical comedy.
So Melody Time was not excluded from Disney Plus. It's right there. You can see it. Donald Duck's on the cover and everything. And Melody Time is interesting. When it comes to the ones that are in there, I am pretty sure I am not wrong in misremembering that this is the one that has a quick Donald and Jose one, where they're just going to like a restaurant and they're all blue. And there's also one where a tugboat and his tugboat son. The tugboat son is really worried about disappointing his tugboat father. Those are good, and I'm pretty sure that they're in Melody Time. I watched these back to back, and I definitely remember the end of Melody Time, which is where, for the first time, I saw Roy Rogers. I've heard of Roy Rogers for quite a while. Never saw him before. They weren't kidding about those sequins.
But until the darkness.
And that short itself, Pecos Bill, or apparently, as Roy Rogers pronounces it, Pecos Bill.
But mostly this story's about Pecos Bill.
Pecos Bill? Who's he?
What? Never heard of Pecos Bill? Imagine that.
Why, I thought everybody knows Pecos. Why, Bobby, I'm surprised at you.
That was really good, and it was a nice one to end with. They ended on a high note. Technically, Make My Music did as well, but it's more notable for Melody Time because, while, like I said, I think probably the best shorts are in Make My Music, the percentage of good shorts in Melody Time is much higher. A lot of Melody Time is just kind of fine, and the fact that there actually isn't a narrator or a through-line narrative going through to connect these shorts together, a presenter, it helps the pacing by a lot too, which is so strange. You'd think that would have been a negative to just completely remove a narrative flow, but it really didn't. If I'm ever going to rewatch Make My Music, I'm not. I'm just going to pick the shorts I liked and then call it good, because the ones I didn't, I really didn't. But Melody Time, even though most of the shorts did not speak to me the same way, most of the good shorts did not speak to me quite the same way, there was a constant quality of, maybe sure, more average than anything else, but it was a good enough percentage of decent to average shorts back to back that made me find the full product not great. I believe I gave it a 2.5, but that's still a watchable film. I can't call Make My Music. It's right over there. I'm still going to point at it. I'm not going to get it back, but it's right there. Just trust me. And for Melody Time, while I'm not chomping at the bit to watch it again, I could watch it again. Quite happily. Even if it's, middle of the road. It's a cartoon anthology. It's nothing more. And at least the cartoons are good and kind of stand up back to back. The best ones in Make My Music stand on their own. And the worst ones drag the film down by a lot. Melody Time, the best ones, mostly do kind of work in sequestration anyway. And there is nothing in the product to drag it all the way down to something bad. I keep saying product. I never have this problem with other Disney films, because other Disney films are Disney films. That's the big problem with this whole era, is that these first 4 films kind of just feel like products. And why wouldn't they? The final 2 films in the package era are the only ones that people really remember. Like, Make My Music gets made fun of for not being in Disney Plus. Melody Time gets made fun of for somehow making the cut, but no one watches that one. And then the first 2, again, the characters, the Three Caballeros, are way more remembered than the movie, The Three Caballeros. This is such a strange era of Disney film. It's forgotten. People remember the Dark Era as being pretty bad. People remember the experimental era for being very up and down. But people don't remember the package film era. Aside from the next two films, there is a fan base for both of them. And thankfully, they're the ones I can actually talk at greater length about, because they are only 2 shorts per film. And are we getting to them just yet? Well, let me go grab my Blu-ray copy of both and find out what I think. The birds are loud today, aren't they? They probably know what I'm about to talk about and are just way too excited. So, the final 2 films of the package film era, as I've said probably about 5 times now, were the only ones that people actually tend to care about. That, of course, being that loud car that just went by has his opinions on it too. But that happens to be the adaptation of The Wind in the Willows plus The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and then the adaptation of Bongo the Circus Bear, and then Jack and the Beanstalk, which happens to star Mickey Mouse. How exciting. Those are the ones that have kind of stood the test of time, and yet, when it comes to Blu-ray, you know, up until Disney Plus came around where they put up every film of theirs except for Make Mine Music, they had to bundle them together to convince people to buy them. Technically, when the DVDs came out, you could just get The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, or Fun and Fancy Free. But when you got this Blu-ray, you got them both. And yet, somehow, that wasn't enough. There's this sticker right here. The Reluctant Dragon is included as a bonus feature. With how much I've had to kind of skip through the contents of these movies, boil them down to just what they are in short film form, is it entirely right to not just throw in an extra review for a movie that, both times I've watched it, I really did wonder why it wasn't included in the package film era.
Walt Disney does it again. The studio of 1,000 surprises brings you its most unusual picture, The Reluctant Dragon, starring Robert Benchley.
The Reluctant Dragon is the kind of thing that would have been an oddball in any other Disney film era, but is kind of just fitting for the package film era. It's just a very little filler documentary of how the animation process works. It is a how-to animate film. It's a behind-the-scenes feature. And they even throw in some actual cartoons. You get to see the filmmaking process. And the funny thing is, as someone who cares a lot about animation and the animation process, it was funny the first time I watched this many years ago, when I bought this Blu-ray, to see, wow, these facts are right, because I've heard these before. And it's funny what we no longer do and what we still do. I say we as if I animate, I can barely draw. What is the plot of Reluctant Dragon, though? Well, some comic artist from the time, I'll put his name in the bottom because I forget it, he decides to lay in a pool for the morning. And then his wife decides, why don't you get off your ass and you go to that Walt Disney man, such a nice guy, and you tell him that this kid's book I'm reading called The Reluctant Dragon, that'd be a great feature film. Not even joking, that's the plot. And so then he goes and he gets distracted by every single thing happening at the Walt Disney Company. Right around the same time that I believe there was a strike going on at the studio. I didn't really confirm that, I've just heard hearsay, and I don't remember the Wikipedia article actually mentioning that kind of thing. I do remember the Wikipedia article mentioning this was actually kind of a hit for the time. People were really interested in finding out about the animation process. No one had boiled it down before, not really. It did well critically and did pretty decently well financially, which, yeah, why isn't this in the package film era? That's better standing than I believe Saludos Amigos got. But Reluctant Dragon is a lot of fun in terms of the fact that, as a documentary, it is not bad. Sometimes it gets a little slow, but the fact that the facts are actually facts, and the fact that they're trying to be entertaining by actually showing you some cartoons in the middle, through the idea of these are the work in progress ones. And it's like, Donald Duck talks directly to the guy, telling him, hey, this is how you animate feet, and what it looks like when you gotta animate feet. Will you listen, for God's sakes? I'm Donald Duck telling you how to animate a foot. There's this one really funny bit where they're showing him the storyboards to one, like the pencil storyboards and everything, and about how this is going to be just this great cartoon, and the cartoon itself is really boring. Okay, sometimes there are those Disney urban legends, like the really dark ones, and when you're like 12 or 13 years old, the first time you hear them, you're like, wow, how could they have gotten away with this? This is just so, the times was just so different, I guess. And then you get a bit older, and you're like, oh, they told me that because I was an edgelord preteen, and I'm too old to believe that now. Then you get a few years older, and you look it up, and it turns out it was right. In Fantasia, there used to be a segment where this awful caricature centaur creature showed up, and was topless too. Like, and when I say black caricature, I mean minstrel show levels. I've never seen that cut of the film for obvious reasons. I never saw Fantasia until like a few years ago for the first time. And I'd only seen like pictures. And pictures online can be obviously doctored, all that stuff. Reluctant Dragon is where I found out that was real. Because at one point, the guy, I keep wanting to call him Paul Whitman. I don't know why. It's not Paul Whitman. That was the King of Jazz. But there's one point where he's touring the studio and they have all these little like clay models, like they put them in a kiln or something, to like so that way they could have like a 3D render, so that way they could draw it better. And one of them is the horrifically racist caricature centaur, and they make fun of the fact she's topless with her tits out because he tries to steal it. He tries to steal it because he's clearly excited over the fact she's topless. I am genuinely not making this up. I only have the Blu-ray version. I've never seen the Disney Plus version. I'll scour to see if that scene is fully uncensored on Disney Plus, but they didn't censor it on this Blu-ray. So if you could find this double pack Blu-ray, and I was going to say look for the sticker on the front, but the back actually does say Reluctant Dragon. So, look, animation historians, go find that. It's genuinely very funny. Speaking of genuinely very funny, around the time the documentary starts to end, by the time the guy finally comes into contact with Walt Disney, who does appear in the film, by the way, so that's actually neat. They actually did make sure that Walt appeared in the movie that kind of does pop up his own studio. That's a very low bar, but it's not always passed, so he actually does humble himself by showing up, barely speaking, just kind of sits there. It's got the weird feeling of just treating him like a guy, despite the fact he was the owner. But the twist ends up being that for all the time he spends trying to pitch the Reluctant Dragon to them, Walt already made a Reluctant Dragon short, and the documentary ends on that. Once the Reluctant Dragon starts, it is genuinely one of the best cartoons from that time, at least from the Walt Disney Company. This whole era inspired me to start making a separate list for every single Walt Disney short. And for the record, if you decide to look at the letterbox list for like every ranked Disney film, because I'm not sure how many times I can make a film just for every single one I watch. Every time I watch one, it gets added to the list there, regardless whether or not there's a video. So if you want spoilers, go ahead and check that list. But also, I am not making videos for all the cartoons, so just go to that list in general if you want my opinions. Like, I just watched most of those new Simpsons ones. Wow, they're awful. But the Reluctant Dragon is so funny, is so charming, has some great animation, some surprisingly great characters, and it's aged a lot better than you think.
Oh, yes, of course. I am a bit of a bard myself.
Really? Oh, how nice.
Yes, quite.
It is such an amazingly well-dated short. For a time where most of the shorts from Disney, because of the war, are horribly dated, Reluctant Dragon ages so well. It's a surprisingly pro-acceptance thing. Galahad and the Dragon fake a fight. they know that the villagers are just going to assume that this dragon is a monster and is pure evil, so fake a fight. The dragon doesn't want to fight anyway, and Galahad has no intention of hurting a creature who is this kind and gentle. So they fake a fight, and then in the next shot after the fake fight, they make it clear that they sell it to the people as, well, now that the dragon's had his butt kicked, he realizes he should not be harming this village, so we'll sign this treaty and all live in harmony. It's a nice message. It's a nice, let's all live together in harmony, especially stereotypically gay knights and dragons. It's so good. Like, the Reluctant Dragon feature film, I would give 3 stars because it's decently entertaining, it's decently educational, it can't help but drag sometimes. Some of the shorts, like I said, aren't that great, but it works for what it is. It is a documentary. Most documentaries, while there are some great ones, mostly documentaries just work. But the Reluctant Dragon short by itself, which unfortunately Letterboxd did not have its own listing, I would give that an easy 4. Like, I am so glad I decided to rewatch Reluctant Dragon just to break it off and add it to this. Because the package film era had been so disappointing. The previous 4 films I do not recommend. They have a few moments that are good, and you can watch those shorts by themselves in whatever fashion you'd like. Reluctant Dragon, though, I actually recommend. The whole movie is not as good as the short at the end, but I don't even know how you... I tried to look for the short on its own, and I couldn't find it. Letterboxd doesn't even seem to suggest that you can do that. And you can do that for the shorts in these 2, so watch The Reluctant Dragon. It's on Disney+. Track down this old Blu-ray. Physical media is better than Sony PlayStation thinks it is. Go check it out some way. You probably won't regret it. It's a surprisingly in-depth documentary that gets a lot of things right, and then ends on one of the best old shorts from the Walt Disney Company. First time I went to Disneyland, it was, I believe, the first time I was also in line for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was. As you've seen, I have hand tattoos, and they caught the eye of this couple who decided to chat with me over how cool they were. And they talked about how the girlfriend of the group had only just found out that day that there was a movie that ride is based on.
For its 50th anniversary celebration, the Disney Vault is opening to release Walt Disney's 11th full-length animated masterpiece, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, now on video for the first time ever. It's a timeless classic movie with 2 fabulous characters who prove that making your dreams come true is the greatest adventure of all.
They were huge fans of the ride and had ridden it several times. And I gotta say, also a very big fan of the ride. The 2 shorts together are based off of short stories. The Wind in the Willows, which is a comical, lighthearted, British short story. And then you have The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, a dark, brooding, American short story. Have I read these short stories myself? No. I have seen this film about 3 or 4 times now, though. And if you ask the common layman, it's the Legend of Sleepy Hollow half that is really what makes the movie work. It is so dark in a weird way for Disney. It's not afraid of implying the main character dies, as in maybe was even murdered by the villain who might have just been the local bully in disguise, who even by that standard was kind of a nicer guy than the main character Ichabod Crane. But for the longest time, I'd always been of the opinion that actually The Wind in the Willows is the better half. I just think it's very funny. Mr. Toad is a very interesting character. He's just got such a lust for life, and it really translates to the screen. I also like all his little friend characters. I like how it's scaled, as in rats and mole, they're the size of a rat and mole. They get the mail at one point from a human, and he's gigantic. But wow, I really finally got the appeal of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Not that I never disliked it. I always thought it was very good as well. I especially love the Bing Crosby number. It's a great little musical number, and there's also a cover of it by Thurl Ravenscroft, which is also very, very good.
Just gather round and I'll elucidate.
Now gather round while I elucidate.
There's things with horns and saucer eyes.
There's ghosts with horns and saucer eyes.
But it did take this viewing for it to just sink in. Wow. Disney struck gold with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow bit. It is one of the, I think, as a short, I probably still prefer Reluctant Dragon, but I now vastly prefer The Legend of Sleepy Hollow short over the Wind of the Willows one. Not that Wind of the Willows is bad at all. I still quite enjoy that too. Like I said, it's funny. It's got this great energy. The comedy just, like, the one-liners and the back-and-forth quips, it's just such a fun thing. And I even genuinely like the villain of that short too. Winky may have nothing over the Headless Horseman, but it's a twist that you should have seen coming, but the first time around is still a bit of a surprise. There is not so much to say other than they picked two shorts that are basically nothing alike, and somehow just decided mashing them together with different narrators and everything would just make a fun feature film. And sure, you could just watch the shorts by themselves, but I actually do think you lose something by not watching them as the film. That juxtaposition really just, it's mood whiplash at its finest. You get a fun, bombastic, very funny, wacky, slight action short, immediately followed up by, here's a kind of just down home folk story set in America where the main character is a massive asshole and everyone around him is probably better people, even the guy who seems to be the villain. And then maybe he dies. As much as I've spoiled it, like, if you've never seen it, you'll still probably be surprised how well it works. In fact, telling you how it ends on both fronts really is the best thing I could do. Because if you just hear, oh, it's a cheerful short and then a dark short, is that going to sell you? But learning the actual details of it, I don't know, I feel like that's the best thing I can do to convince you to watch this movie that is a bit more obscure. Also, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, one of the best rides in the park. Absolutely, I love Mr. Toad's Wild Ride a lot. Probably more than the whole movie. Oh my god. It is like 11:30. Everyone's got to go to work, I guess. I have been pretty good at setting aside my nostalgia for these. Even in the Silver Era, which I admitted is probably the most nostalgic I have, because I've seen every single one of those movies before I turned 8. But so many of them I basically went in fresh because it had been so long. And there are other films I grew up on that I still have an adult's take on. I certainly remember them very well, but I always go into a movie approaching it for what it is. And so when were we going to get back to Fun and Fancy Free? I remember thinking, this will be the one that proves I don't really have much of a nostalgia blindness. Because I grew up on Fun and Fancy Free. It's the only package film era I watched as a kid, and I watched it a lot. I was a huge fan of Fun and Fancy Free as a kid. I was so excited when they announced this Blu-ray, because I had seen Ichabod and Toad before, one time previously, I believe on Netflix. But I bought this Blu-ray for Fun and Fancy Free. And then when I watched it all those years ago, everything the internet's told me was not entirely wrong, that the Mickey and the Beanstalk short, while still holds up, you know, Bongo, it just has its own problems. It's so slow, it's so dated. Then I watched it again for this ranking. And the internet is wrong, and I am nostalgia blind. I frigging love Fun and Fancy Free all over again.
The only movie ever made starring Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy, and Jiminy Cricket. Walt Disney's 9th animated classic, Fun and Fancy Free.
Hi, Editing Wyatt here with a spoiler. I got a new microphone. I said I'd be getting it before the end of the year. I got it before I finished the next video. Wow, look at that. That means that the Renaissance ranking will be coming before the end of this year. Look at that. Also, watching the trailers back to back, I couldn't help but notice that that guy, I'm guessing either Corey Burton or some other like Disney announcer guy, was like, Ichabod, Mr. Toad is movie number 11, and Fun and Fancy Free is masterpiece number 9. I messed up the order without even knowing. I could have swore that Make Mine Music was immediately preceded by Melody Time. It's not. It's immediately preceded by Fun and Fancy Free. Oops. I accidentally made a sequential ranking list because I started with the worst and ended with the best. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry, my reputation is gone forever. While I have you here, did you know that you could go to itch.io and buy some books that I've written? One of which is actually not a book, it is a collection of all the play scripts I wrote when I was in school, which means it's an anthology, just like most of the films in this ranking. That's weird timing, isn't it? Anyway, go support there if you want. And if you can. Oh, but if you think about supporting me but don't have the funds, there's actually a free book on there right now, so download that and then say it's great online. Or if you don't like it, I'm sorry, it's free though. I'm gonna start editing and I'll finally see if the microphone quality is any good. Isn't that great? So what is Fun and Fancy Free? It certainly has the strongest narrative through line of any of these package film era films. And even people who are critical of it seem to agree with that. After all, you start with Jiminy Cricket introducing, just this person's house. And, he runs on a record of Dinah Shore. He gets almost eaten by a fish. Man, it is such a hijinks. Like, Jiminy Cricket's never been in more peril. And then, Dinah Shore is like, and I'm going to tell you about the story of Bongo the Circus Bear. And again, many people on the internet will tell you, this is such a boring short. I can't believe Disney got away with such a boring short. Naysayers. Bongo the Circus Bear, for one, it's aged very well. It is all about a bear in the circus going through the day-to-day life of being a circus animal and realizing this is a terrible existence. I hate this. I want to go run free like animals are supposed to. And then eventually he falls in love, but then the evil Lumpjaw, I think it's Lumpjaw, comes and he knocks down 100 trees and it's like, no, I don't care. I'm in love with the little girl bear. I said it that way, and I'm realizing that is the implication. Oh my god. And then everyone makes fun of the musical number, because it's like, when bears slap the hell out of each other, that means they love each other, which is a bad message for children, but it's also really funny. And also, okay, I'm not going to defend the choice too hard because I get why people are caught off guard by it. It does seem to be consensual. So this is probably just BDSM and not abuse. Still very weird for a children's movie. But, the climax scene where Lumpjaw and Bongo fight each other and Bongo just kind of is on the ropes, but also he knows his circus trips. It's fun. It is just pure fun. As you'll see in my shorts ranking on Letterboxd, if you go pick, I ended up putting it higher than Wind in the Willows. I think Bongo is much better than it gets credit, including the fact that the last time I saw it, I thought it was kind of boring, but then I watched it again and no. Headspace. You need to be in the right headspace for Bongo. As in, just sit there and expect that silly little cartoon to have some fun with. But then after that, Jiminy, he listened to the record and he sees the dolls hugging and it's like, that's great. And then he finds someone else's birthday invitation. And it's like, well, I'm going to invite myself to this, I think. And he gets to meet Edgar Bergen. I had no idea who he was when I was very little when I first saw this film, but I immediately learned who he was. But I was a young adult by the time I finally saw the Muppet movie, and when Edgar Bergen popped up, the smile on my face, because I knew who that was. Most of y'all have never heard of Edgar Bergen. You don't know Mortimer Schnurrt. You don't know Charlie McCarthy, the only good McCarthy in all of human history. The mood whiplash is not as severe as going from Wind of the Willows to Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but there is definitely still a bit of a different feeling. While both shorts are comedic, Mickey and the Beanstalk is openly a parody. It is kind of making fun of the source material in some ways. For the most part, it is just an adventure with Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, and it has one of the most iconic Donald Duck scenes ever, where Donald doesn't give in, Donald doesn't give up, and he just loses his mind and gets like murderously angry eating plates. It's amazing. And again, as this plot's going on, you'll get interjections from Mortimer not really knowing what's going on, Edgar Bergen trying to be lighthearted and tell these kids stuff, Charlie McCarthy wanting nothing to do with this movie and just snarking the entire time. And I don't care how mature you think you are, Charlie McCarthy's funny. Him just lambasting this movie is funny. There's a reason why, even if Fun and Fancy Free is not the most beloved, you'll rarely find people who are mad at Mickey and the Beanstalk. You'll find people whose biggest criticism is, this should have just been a film all by itself. And for all the times I've watched it, you know, I want to see where those people are coming from, but I think the shorter runtime genuinely enhances it. Which is not a thing I could say about the package film era as a whole. Those are all just, up until these last two, even if we count Reluctant Dragon, are just shorts tied together that all do feel like short films, like little short cartoons. But when you get to those two do feel like anthologies, where just two things are the main focus. And they really work for that. They're the easiest things to recommend from the whole package film era. Especially Fun and Fancy Free. Like, I get anybody who's like, no, Ichabod and Toad are the best ones. Those shorts just work together so well, even if they don't have exactly as strong of a narrative tie as Jiminy Cricket messing up someone's house and then gate crashing a birthday party. But I just can't personally agree with that. I do have a lot of respect for Ichabod and Mr. Toad for taking a formula that just wasn't working throughout most of this era and finally hitting the nail on the head. Like, even if you count Reluctant Dragon, that film is just a documentary with a very great cartoon at the very end. So it even smokes that. But Fun and Fancy Free is just very, very solid. I very much love it. It is one of the few feature-length films starring Mickey Mouse, the other ones being both Fantasia films and Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he's genuinely just a cameo in those. This is the closest to starring role in a feature film Mickey Mouse ever got. Where am I left with this? Because both these films are so easy to review, because it is just, is the first short good? Yes. Is the second short good? Oh, it's even better. And is that all you need to know? We can discuss the differences of, there's just two different narrators in Ichabod and Toad, who are really good picks for their source material, and then there's, you know, three narrators in Fun and Fancy Free. Jiminy Cricket basically gets to narrate the through-line stuff, Dinah Shore gets to narrate Bongo, and then Edgar Bergen and his puppets get to narrate Fun and Fancy Free. And sure, if we're going to crown a winner between those 5 candidates, I'm going to pick Edgar Bergen. Technically, I'm picking Charlie McCarthy, let's be real here, but I'm picking Edgar Bergen. Fun and Fancy Free is one where it's probably a bit higher on the list because of my nostalgic attachment. But I definitely recognize that if I had not seen this film until I was a young adult for the first time, or an adult for the first time, perhaps I'd be a little bit less ready to be in love with the bongo section. But I would absolutely still eat up Mickey and the Beanstalk, and especially Edgar Bergen and his puppets. They're just such fun films to put together in a way that makes a very fun total film. The package film era got off to maybe the roughest start out of every Disney film era, but a thing I realized about halfway through this ranking, which, you know, considering that would have been Make Mine Music, which I'd never seen before. Make Mine Music and Melody Time were the only ones that I watched for the first time when I started this ranking process. And by the time I got there, I had this revelation. I was just curious to see how the package film era turned out. I'm aware that it's a bit, you know, contentious, forgotten, not all that beloved, up until the very end. But I'm gonna say it, this was the worst era for Disney films. None of these films ended up hitting the very, very, very low bits of the list. I mean, like, there's stuff in here worse than, say, like, Dinosaur, but there's nothing as bad as Home on the Range. But yet, you know, both the dark era and the experimental era, when they had things going for them, they had something really, really going for them. And it wasn't just like a course correction at the end, like the package film era had. The experimental era was, let's try something new. Let's be bombastic. We're going to swing for the fences, and, you know, you don't always hit it when that happens. The dark era was, oh god, what do we do? Animation as a whole is just in this bad spot. But we'll try. We're going to still come up with ideas. But the package film era, you can tell so much of it turned out the way it did because it just had to turn out that way. The first two films don't feel like Disney cared. It's so obvious that they were mandated films. And then the middle two films, those are, we're out of money. We can't do anything. Just put some shorts together. Who cares if they make sense together? Who cares if they're all that good? Throw them in, throw them out to the public, see what happens. I count Reluctant Dragon. This Walt Disney Company does not. And again, it's like the third best film, and I had to pretend it counted. And then you get to the very, very end where suddenly, hey, these are stories we wanted to make. We don't have the budget to make either of them a full film, so just shorten their length, put them together. And considering these were all short stories in their source material, it's not that noticeable. And it makes something very interesting. It makes very strong anthology films in an era where they're all anthologies and most of them kind of blow. These are the only films you need to watch from the package film era, including The Reluctant Dragon, which doesn't count. That DVD copy of Make Mine Music, which I'm not even going to go bother grabbing. The best part about that is that I can watch the extra shorts that were on it. And again, because it's Make Mine Music, there are some really good shorts in there, and I can just cut to those. But that's it. We've got, like, nothing all that great from Saludos Amigos. We've got, like, one or two decent shorts from Three Caballeros. Like, 3, maybe 4 pretty fun shorts in Make Mine Music. A lot of decent to middling, and then one very good short from Melody Time. But then thankfully it's all saved at the end. And that still makes the worst Disney era. Which is also funny because a lot of the other Disney eras, they get like their worst at the very end, you know? Like Bambi's really good, but Dumbo is not to the same quality as the films that came before it. You know, we'll talk about it when I review the Renaissance, but people love the first half of the Renaissance Universally, the second half, while still enjoyed more than usual, is a lot more divisive. The experimental film era starts with Fantasia 2000. By the middle, you get Lilo and Stitch and Treasure Planet. And then at the very end, you get Home on the Range and Chicken Little. The Dark Era, I guess, sort of fits the same mold as the package film era, peaking at the end, because the Great Mouse Detective is there. But, so is Oliver and Company, and that's liked by a lot of people. I'm not one of them. And even the most recent era of Disney, remember the second Renaissance, as people were calling it, up until about sometime after Moana, I guess? It's not a really beloved era right now in terms of Wreck-It Ralph 2, Frozen 2, it's a sequel fest. It is more interesting to talk about how the package film era turned out and why it turned out that way than it is to talk about most of the films in it. So if you're not a big historian or big animation buff, I can imagine, this episode must be so weird for you. I'm talking more about history than I am about the actual contents. But there's no other way to do it. The films are so disjointed and just a bunch of cartoons. I would have had to go super deep into every single cartoon to technically review these films, and for the most part, they're not worth it. The only ones that are worth going in depth to are the ones that only have 2 cartoons each. And that is my final opinion on the package film era. If we're not counting Reluctant Dragon, there are only 6 films. And only 2 of them are worth your time.